Hello friends, welcome to our lecture series on CSR. Myself Aditya P. Tripathi. We are going to discuss about mandatory CSR versus Gandhiji's trusteeship model, and this is going to be part 2 of our lecture series on trusteeship model versus mandatory CSR. And in this very lecture, I'll be telling you about the the differences between the trusteeship model and mandatory CSR, and also I'll be telling you what are those points where they are having the similar intention. They are having the essence of these two important events are basically similar, and you will find that there is no big difference between the two. It is only the way it is being implemented. Gandhiji talked about voluntarily contributing to the welfare of the society, whereas mandatory CSR talks about the legal provision regarding this, that you have to contribute towards the development of society in which you are living. So with this very agenda, I'll be telling you about what is mandatory CSR versus Gandhiji's trusteeship model. I'll be basically focusing upon similarities and differences between the two. Now let us talk about the history of social responsibility as far as India as a country is concerned. In the previous lecture of mine, I tried to tell you about the basics of trusteeship model. Today we'll be looking at it from the point of view of drawing a line of difference between mandatory CSR vis-a-vis this trusteeship model of the father of nation given by our father of nation, Mahatma Gandhiji. So if we look at the history of social responsibility in Indian perspective, we basically follow the tradition of Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Bhag Bhavet, which basically outlines the basic philosophy of life, and it is applicable at individual as well as at the corporate level. And this very shloka, which is ancient Sanskrit shloka, it basically talks about welfare of all and survival of all. It says that we are not only supposed to talk about the self development, the self well-being, but we talk about the welfare of all, each and every person who is on this earth and who is basically forming part of our universe. They are supposed to have their peaceful life. There should be a welfare of all, and all of us should survive in an equitable manner, and there should not be any problem with each other. That is the basic philosophy with which we are living in a country like India, and which is very much rare when we look at the Western culture, the Western development, and the Western philosophy. They basically lack here only, and it is basically the richness of Indian ethos, which I would say that it is basically making us putting us in a position of leadership, and we are all set to become a Vishwaguru. We have been a Vishwaguru, and once again we are reviving that, and we are there to guide, as a country we are there to guide the rest of the world, that it is we only who talk about Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya. The Vedas basically assert that there shall be proper distribution of wealth from the wealthy to the poor. And we never believed between the haves and have-nots. We never thought of having this kind of divide, rich and poor divide, which we call as of now. And they also condemned those who enjoy wealth without partaking it with others. We have been believing in sharing. We believe that we should share and care for each other when we are living in a country like India. And one shall not be selfish and consume all by himself. I'm not saying that. This is basically said by Rig Veda, and it basically says that we should not be that selfish, that where we think of ourselves only and we consume everything, whatever we earn, whatever we create, and we try to consume everything by ourselves. That should not be the way we should lead our life, and that is not the Indian culture as far as India is concerned. So we have been believing into Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, and with that philosophy we are leading our life. And when we talk about corporate citizens, they are also supposed to follow the same rule, the same path. And if we talk about the Atharva Samhita, it talks about wealth accumulated through 100 hands should be distributed to thousands of hands. So if there are 100 hands which are earning, it should be distributed to 1,000 hands at least. And the objective is to ensure that nobody is feeling deprived, There is no place for deprivation in a country like India. We believe that whatever we earn, it is not only for ourselves, it is for the entire society, and we are basically acting as a trustee of that. Suppose if I am earning a lakh rupee, that entire lakh rupees doesn't belong to me only. I should take care of all those people where to whomsoever I meet, and to whom I think of, being our neighbors, being our friend, acquaintances, or whatever nomenclature you assign. So with this philosophy, Gandhiji had a model of trusteeship where he said that in his patrika called Harijan, in 1939 he published this para where he wrote that, supposing I have come by a fair amount of wealth, either by way of legacy or by means of trade and industry, either I have inherited from my parents or I have earned by the way of my business, my industry, I must know that all that wealth does not belong to me. This line is very important. Whatever I have inherited from my forefathers, or whatever I have generated by my own hard work, commitment, dedication, or whatever work I am into, whatever business or profession I am into, I must know that that entire wealth does not belong to me. What belongs to me is the right to have an honorable livelihood, no better than that enjoyed by millions of others. Because if we look at the honorable livelihood, it is a very subjective term. And Gandhiji could envision that no better than that enjoyed by millions of others. What millions of others have got, which is being called as honorable livelihood, the same is applicable for us also. And the rest of my wealth belongs to the community and must be used for the welfare of the community. This is what is basically the essence of this trusteeship model given by the father of nation. And he said that whatever amount we have earned, that doesn't belong to us only, that doesn't belong to an individual, it belongs to the entire community. And after taking our own share from that income, the rest of our wealth, which belongs to community, and it must be used for the welfare of the community. And this is basically the essence of trusteeship model. In brief, if you have to understand, this is the quote which you must read, and it is being taken from his publication called Harijan, where he wrote in 1939. Now, if we talk about trusteeship of Gandhiji, he basically offered an ideal combination of economics and morals. When we talk about earning money, at times we forget about the values and ethics, and we feel that what matters here is the amount which I earn. But this trusteeship model basically offers an ideal combination of economics and morals. Unfortunately, some people thought, or I would say there was a section of society which used to think that Gandhiji was against creation of wealth, or against earning, or against creating wealth. No, he was not at all against creation of capital. What he was against, that you should not feel that the entire capital which you have generated, it belongs to you. Basically, it is the community, it is the society which has helped you in earning that, in generating that income, and you should think of the community as a whole and for their welfare also. Not only yours, but also for the entire society. And this trusteeship, if I have to explain it to you in certain points, I would say that it provides a means of transforming the capitalist order of society into an egalitarian one. That you should have a more broader view about looking at the capitalist order, and it gives no quarter of capitalism, but no quarter to capitalism, but gives the present owning class a chance to reform itself. It is giving you a chance to reform. If you are basically owning that entire capital, you have got a chance to reform yourself. And it is basically based on the faith or belief or trust that human nature is never beyond redemption. So it is, your nature is never beyond redemption, and here comes the point of difference, where Gandhiji talked about the trusteeship as a way of reforming the society also. It was not only meant for generating wealth or distributing or redistributing among the stakeholders, among the people from different parts of the society. But the objective was to create a reform, to basically offer a new perspective of looking at generation of capital and its distribution or redistribution again. That was basically the motive which I could feel, which I could realize after reading the literature available on this specific topic. I could connect that yes, this must have been the vision, that income is there, capital is there, it can be distributed also, but there should be an inner voice telling you or guiding you that you should run on a righteous path, and where you think of not only yourself but also the entire community, the entire society. And that is the beauty of this very model of trusteeship which Gandhiji provided. And remember, it does not recognize any right of private ownership of property except so far as it may be permitted by society for its own welfare. It doesn't recognize, it doesn't provide you any right to have a private ownership of property. Whatever property you have generated, you have created, you should not think that it belongs to you only. It is basically the community, and whatever capital you have generated, that should be used for the entire society and its welfare. That is what is the motive. And it does not exclude legislation of ownership and use of wealth. Remember, it includes legislation of ownership and use of wealth. That was the point where people had a negative approach or negative understanding of this very noble idea of Gandhiji's trusteeship, although majority had a very positive mindset towards this very idea, because the objective as a whole was to ensure the social welfare, the welfare of community, and that made this model still relevant. Even if today we talk about this model, we can think that yes, we basically belong to an economy, to a democracy which talks about the welfare economy, and where the welfare of general public is the top motto of our government. And there also, in all government flagship schemes, as far as the present government is concerned, I can ensure and I can assure that if you look at all the schemes, their objective is not to make profit, is not to generate capital, but to ensure the welfare of general public or public at large. So we are basically there to ensure that there is a public welfare, there is a welfare of general public or downtrodden people or the lower income strata of the society. That is what is the motive, and it was basically the motive of this very model of trusteeship. And in the first instance, everything must be surrendered to God. This is what Gandhiji wanted to say, that initially you should surrender everything to the Almighty, and then out of it one may use only what is necessary for the service of God's creation according to one's limited needs. So he basically advocated to have limited requirements, limited needs. One should not, suppose if you start earning, you should not increase your expenses, you should not increase your needs in the same proportion or in a greater proportion. So one should have a limited requirement or limited need, and accordingly, of course, if you have limited needs, then only you can think of others. Otherwise, whatever you earn, you will feel that it is actually very less for me. So the more you earn, the more you earn, the lesser you feel that you are still very poor, and you have to buy this, you have to buy that. That was not the essence of trusteeship. It was basically opposite to that. And when an individual had more than his respective portion, he becomes a trustee of that portion of God's people. This is what Gandhiji has given as the essence of trusteeship model. And he suggested that this doctrine of this entire doctrine or idea or theory or model, whatever nomenclature you assign, this model of trusteeship, basically it is an answer to the economic inequalities. Imagine at that very point of time, he could talk about the rising income inequality, which has actually become the topmost problem of our economy as of now also. So he could dream of this situation, he could think of this situation, that a time will come when this income inequality will rise with a greater magnitude, and a kind of, basically this trusteeship model can be used as a weapon, as a remedy, or as a idea of reform to ensure that it is a kind of non-violent way of resolving all social and economic conflicts. So there should not be any social or economic conflict. If you lead your life in this way, of course nobody is going to fight, and the rich and poor divide can definitely be eliminated, and that is actually the motive behind having this kind of idea. So while propounding this kind of model called trusteeship model, Gandhiji could think of rising income inequalities, which was there at that point of time also, and he could think of its magnitude in years to come, and this still can be used as a way of resolving the problem. We can find a very nice example of our progressive income tax system, where the more you earn, the greater amount you pay as on account of income tax. If you talk about income tax Act 1961 as far as India is concerned, and you have different slabs. So for lower income people, the rate of taxation is on a lighter side, that is called 10%, and gradually with every increase in your income after a certain level, there is a slab for that. And accordingly, your along with the increase in your income, you have to shell out the higher amount on account of income tax as far as direct tax is concerned in Indian scenario. So that is the motive behind this, is to ensure that you contribute. The more you earn, you contribute towards the betterment of society. And since the government belongs to you, the country is yours, government is yours. You have the largest democracy in the world. Government is yours, so you should basically contribute towards the betterment of the society and the nation as a whole. So if you ask me to conclude, I would say that under state regulated trusteeship, an individual will not be free to hold or use his wealth for selfish satisfaction and disregard to the interest of society. That was basically the initial idea, that there can be a legislation. So there also we had a kind of mandatory provisions, thinking about mandatory provisions, and here I would say that mandatory CSR and trusteeship, they are going hand in hand. They are talking about the similar direction. They were thinking in similar direction. Even CSR section 135 provision under Companies Act 2013 talks about mandatory CSR. Likewise in trusteeship model also, we had a plan. Gandhiji had a plan for state regulated trusteeship. And this is the point of similarity, I would say, as far as these two models are concerned, these 2 points are concerned. So it is proposed to give a decent minimum living wage. A limit should be fixed for the maximum income, and that would be allowed to any person in the society. That was basically the idea at that point of time. And the difference between minimum and maximum income should be reasonable and equitable and variable, and it should be revised from time to time. It should not be like that once you have fixed that this is minimum income, this is maximum income, and it is not revised according to the requirement. So according to time, conditions, expenditure, the way the dearness is increasing, it should be revised. That was the objective, and it should be revised in such a way that the tendency would be towards the obliteration of the difference, and they should think of having a group cohesiveness, and he could think of a society where people talk about the social welfare, the welfare of community at large. And under the Gandhian economic order, the character of production will be determined by social necessity and not by the personal greed. So it was the social necessity which is supposed to guide under the Gandhian economic order, which we presented in the name of trusteeship model. Now the question comes in the background of all this, what Gandhiji had dreamt about the trusteeship model, the kind of society he wanted to build. What we have today, what is the present scenario? Of course, there are certain exceptions. There are some companies which are exceptionally doing, some corporate entities which are exceptionally doing good for the welfare of the society. They think of their employees, they think of all the stakeholders as a whole. I'll tell you about the stakeholders. Who all are the stakeholders? Paying tax on time, taking care of their customers' requirement, offering congenial atmosphere to the employees. So to whomsoever you deal, they are basically the stakeholder. So of course your employees, they are in the inner circle, the government to whom you have to pay tax, customers to whom you have to sell the product, suppliers from whom you are buying the products, your raw material, processing, even the suppliers of machineries from whom you are buying your machinery, offering it to your customers, paying tax to the government, and eventually the society at large, where you are doing, where you are conducting this entire process of transforming your raw material into finished goods and then offering it to the society. So all these components, they form part of the stakeholder mechanism, that these are the parties to whom you are accountable, to whom you are answerable, and you have to basically, as a corporate entity, you have to think of each and every stakeholder. And that is the basic idea about ensuring that what I am doing for the society. Because if I don't satisfy my customer, if my customer is not satisfied, of course I am going to lose my sales. I am going to incur a loss in terms of loss of sales. If my employees are not happy, I would actually be witnessing a problem of higher attrition rate. Employees will leave. If I am not paying tax, there are penal provisions. But what about the society? Society is not going to take any they don't have any mechanism to take negative, to react. Because whatever harm you have generated or you have caused to the society, to the natural resources, in terms of the emission which you are generating out of your production process, the air which you are polluting, the water pollution which you are generating, all these things, they are basically, they form part of the social welfare, and we have to ensure this also as a stakeholder. We should ensure that we are leaving the world in the at least in the same format in which we have inherited from our forefathers. That is what is the motive. What we have today, basically, we have the pockets of immense economic progress. We have progressed immensely, together with economic depredation of the masses and social exploitation along age-old feudal hierarchies, as well as rising rich-poor income divide. This is what is applied today. We are nowhere behind in terms of our GDP growth rate. Nowhere. We are nowhere lagging behind in terms of our scientific development, our research, our customer services, our demographic dividend, which we talk about as far as India is concerned, which we are basically enjoying as of now. But along with that, what is the problem? The problem is that there is still a rising rich-poor income divide. Most of the global agencies, they have been publishing this, that in all other countries apart from other different countries of the world, even India is also witnessing this problem of rising rich-poor income divide, where we are dividing our society in two different segments of haves and have-nots. There are some people who have a huge amount of capital, and at times there is a data which is published that around 75% of the property belongs to only 5% of people. So 5% of the entire population, 5% of, or you can say handful of people, they are having majority of the wealth in their hands, and the remaining people, they have a very minuscule amount of property or wealth, what you call as income, what you call as wealth, in terms of wealth they have in their hands. So this is basically the rising rich-poor income divide, and I personally feel that this trusteeship model can, to a greater extent, it can eliminate this very problem of rich-poor income divide. Now, coming to pointing out the differences between the mandatory CSR, or I would say that it is a kind of revisiting trusteeship. If you look at the essence of the mandatory CSR, you would find that yes, it is mandated by the government regulation, by an enactment, but still the motto is the same. Objective is the same, to ensure that you are, as a corporate citizen, you are working for the betterment of your society. So the modern concept of CSR is basically, it is considered as a kind of extension of doctrine of trusteeship of wealth, as are articulated by Gandhiji, and the basic principles, you would find that they are the same as those of trusteeship. If you try to look at the similarity, you would find that whether mandatory CSR we talk about, or we talk about revisiting trusteeship, both of these provisions or models, they aim at business community engagement. That business must engage with the community, they must think of community at large, they must think of society at large. And again, I would be re-quoting that they should think of Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. They should talk about the welfare of each and every person. Welfare of all should be their motto. And on Gandhiji's appeal, if you go back to the history, you would find that at his point of time when Gandhiji appealed, many of his contemporaries, they basically engaged in society building activities. Like some of them, they came forward to establish schools, some of them they contributed to the establishment of hospitals, some of them they basically contributed to the services of animals, like they established goshalas and all, and their contribution was immense. We are not going to forget their contribution, but who was the person at the helm of the affair? Who was the person appealing them? It was Gandhiji who appealed. And I would like to here give you two very often quoted examples of G.D. Birla, who helped C.V. Raman to acquire necessary equipment. See, a scientist is being helped by a business enterprise to conduct his research, and Homi Bhabha, he was backed by Tatas. They helped several promising people under their philanthropy, what they call as philanthropy. Although CSR doesn't mean philanthropy, but still in a way it is contributing to that aspect also. And these two examples of G.D. Birla helping C.V. Raman or Tata helping Homi Bhabha is basically a live example that, see, they contributed. It was not their business to contribute to the research and development. Their business was to do business, but still they contributed to these scientists, and we still take pride in quoting their name, that yes, these were the scientists about which India is still proud of. And it was basically highlighted. These two examples were highlighted in this book which I have referred here by Pushpa Sundar, Beyond Business, From Merchant Charity to Corporate Citizenship, and it was published by Tata McGraw-Hill. And in that book these two examples have been quoted. There are a number of examples, but I have only quoted those examples which are published. So in present times, if we talk about Azim Premji, who is the chairman of Wipro, he see the privileged as trustees of wealth. And if you look at his contribution, he has created a philanthropic endowment fund which is valued at rupees 2,40,000 crore as on date. And this foundation is being established for contributing to a just, equitable, humane and sustainable society. So in this way I have tried to explain you about the similarities where the mandatory CSR and Gandhiji's trusteeship model, they are the same. In the next lecture of mine, I will be telling you about the differences also. I hope you must have enjoyed today's lecture of mine. Thank you so much.